Slavery is back.
Welcome to a place where private business profit from a captive labour force, yet pennies are spent on medical services to a population in which the Indigenous, the poor and the mentally ill are overrepresented. Where isolation, humiliation and degradation are facts of life. Welcome to prison.
It depends who's telling the story, I suppose. The prisoners would have one view, the people who work in the prison system would have another, and I think it's up to people to decide where the truth is.
Give government propaganda and the media spin doctors the flick. And check out Doin' Time for news, views and tunes on prison issues from Guantanamo Bay to Christmas Island to prisons and detention centres everywhere. Every Monday at 4 p.m. on your community radio 3CR.
We are still fired up and we're still talking about revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Doin' Time show. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. This is Marissa and I'll be taking you through until 5 o'clock this evening. And a warning that this episode of Doin' Time may contain audio images and descriptions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who have died and deaths in custody. This week on Doin' Time, we will first of all bring you an interview with Jeff Waters, author of Gone for a Song, A Death in Custody on Palm Island. Then we will hear from Dr. David Abello from People with Disability Australia, who will give a report back on the Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras parade on Saturday 25th February as part of Sydney's World Pride 2023. Gone for a Song explores the issues surrounding Murungi's contentious arrest, his sudden death and the long sequence of botched police investigations and official challenges to an inquest. It also focuses attention on the crucial secret evidence, which to this day remains suppressed by the Coroner's Court. Written by Jeff Waters, an ABC journalist who closely followed the case, this book also puts the abusive treatment of Indigenous Queenslanders in its full historical context. In doing so, it sheds light on how such a death could happen and why it could lead to aborted investigations. During his career, Jeff Waters has worked as a journalist in almost 30 countries, focusing largely on human rights, social justice and environmental issues. In June 1996, he became the first Australian reporter to employ new digital cameras to set up a freelance video journalist operation in Europe and North Africa, which resulted in work for companies like Associated Press Television and CNN and allowed him to pursue important subjects. He's held a variety of positions for ABC News and current affairs in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Darwin, and recently won several Queensland Media Awards for ABC television and radio current affairs stories on social justice issues. I have taken the liberty to read out a couple of things from the preface of the book itself, and also just to give a little bit of information about Jeff, given that this book was I believe published in 2008, and I'll check that publication date with Jeff in a minute. But I really wanted to talk about that because to me the book is never old, because these issues are always relevant, and I wanted to speak with Jeff about the book and also about deaths in custody. Hello, Jeff. Welcome to the program.
Well, hello, and what a remarkable introduction. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is lovely to have you, and in fact, last week when we practically almost ran into each other in the kitchen at 3CR, I was so determined to just grab you and put you on air.
Well, here I am.
So when was the book published, Jeff?
Yeah, you were right, 2008, after the events of 2004, which is when Murungi met his untimely demise, and which is what, the time frame that the book looks at. But as you say, it also goes back into the history of Palm Island to give an Indigenous rights in Queensland to give a context to why this death in custody may and what was announced about it may have led to rioting that resulted in the burning down of the courthouse and of the police watch house.
So let's go back to the beginning. So what prompted you to write the book? I know that you're involved in you lived actually in Queensland in the Joh Bjelke-Petersen era. Can you just tell us what led to you, writing the book?
Well, I certainly did. I grew up in the Bjelke-Petersen era in Queensland and went to university at the time, when things were at their, worst. But then I went south to Canberra and Sydney and went overseas to Britain and Europe, as you mentioned, and but then had children and decided to come home to Australia and brought my young family to Brisbane and was working for the ABC's radio current affairs programs, AM and PM, and when the death in custody happened and then the riot happened, and my response to what was being shown in the general media, mainstream media, commercial media, it was, as I say in that preface, sort of almost gloating that they were having this wonderful story to fall on their laps of a revolt in an Aboriginal community, how terrible this community must be, and how brave and exemplary the police are in quashing the rebellion. But of course, investigations and subsequent. So I was working for PM and AM at the time, and I was quite disgusted by what was happening. So I decided to delve into it. Got into contact with people who were very close to the dead man, and started to find out things that I could run in stories that effectively changed public opinion about the whole thing. For instance, the first story that grabbed headlines was the fact that I found out that there was actually a watch house video of the man in question dying and screaming for help that the police had not mentioned in any of the evidence files and was basically being covered up. So that sort of thing, as soon as the public started hearing, well, hold on a minute, why are the police trying to cover this up, then the story could start rolling in the other direction, so to speak.
So the book was actually written around the time that Lex Wotton was arrested? Or was it before that?
No, Lex Wotton, the book was certainly written after Lex Wotton was arrested.
Just to put in context.
Years after he was first arrested, absolutely.
Absolutely. And after he was gagged and suppressed from speaking?
Yes, absolutely. And they used a taser on him. This was in response to the riot. Police used a taser on him illegally, as tasers hadn't been approved in Queensland at that stage. And threw him in prison. His wife went into premature labour, and she was flown to Townsville Hospital, leaving there several other children. I don't remember how many, 4 or 5 other children unattended, and with no recourse but to go and try and find help from neighbours and family around the neighbourhood. The children were left unattended. So this is the sort of treatment that happened to that family. Of course, Lex was subsequently found not to have caused the riot, but this is what happened in Queensland at that time.
Because it really was a legitimate protest, wasn't it?
Well, it was certainly a legitimate protest. What had happened was that due to a large amount of evidence being suppressed and the actual coroner who examined the body in Cairns wasn't sent all of the details of what had happened, the coroner wrote in a document that, to the best of his, the best that he could work out, the man must have died in a fall because his spleen had been ruptured, his liver had been cleaved in two internally, and this could only result from a very high fall. So, unfortunately, the poor mayor at the time, an elderly woman, was given no choice but to read out these findings at a public meeting in the main square of Palm Island, with hundreds of people gathered, and she had to read out that the coroner had found that the man had died in a fall, and that is what subsequently triggered the riot. Lex and a number of other people got up on the microphone and spoke, and soon after the buildings burnt down.
Yeah, it was a very, very miscarriage of justice.
Well, yes. I mean, there's no way that Morinci died in a fall.
No.
There was nowhere high enough. I mean, apart from, the book details it all, but effectively he was repeatedly punched. And this while he was lying on the ground, and this is what caused the injuries that killed him.
There is a paragraph here that at the beginning of the book that I'd really like to take the liberty to read out. Is that okay, Jeff?
Yeah, sure, of course you can.
This particular one, and I'll just read it. One hot morning.
Been out there for a long time now.
It has, and but it doesn't matter because week in, week out, I report on Aboriginal deaths in custody, and we provide extensive coverage on the Doing Time show. And it's just really important I feel, to have this book to highlight the fact that the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody, there are 339 recommendations. Has anything really changed? I mean, Chris Hurley didn't need to take the young Indigenous man to the police station, did he? I mean,
no.
Prison is a last resort, right?
Yes.
That's one of the recommendations.
Yes, he was drunk. The man who was arrested was drunk. Dead man was drunk. Walking along the road, he was a bit of a joker. The police were arresting another person, and Morinci sung out the words to the song "Who Let the Dogs Out" as a joke as he walked past the police. And 45 minutes later, he was dead.
Exactly, as it says in this paragraph, which is so powerful. It's one hot morning in November 2004 on Queensland's Palm Island, a young Indigenous man made some comments that clearly irritated the police officer in the midst of making an arrest nearby. And then you talk in the book about how that less than 2 hours later...
Sorry, less than 2 hours later. I got my times wrong.
Yeah, later. He died in the lockup. And then 2 years after that, Chris Hurley faced court and found not guilty.
That's right. That's right. Well, the reason he was found not guilty, it was a wonder that ever got to court because the Director of Public Prosecutions would have, intricately looked at the evidence that was available for a conviction and seen that a conviction was impossible. Chris Hurley was never going to go to jail. It was a bit of a show trial, if you ask me, in a positive sense, I suppose. But he was never going to be found guilty because his colleagues had covered up the evidence of the murder. I can't say the M word out loud, or I might get sued. Sorry, of the death, covered up the evidence of the way that he had been killed, Morinci had been killed, to such a wonderful extent that it would never have been possible to convict anybody of that death.
So, in effect, it appears that there were lots of lies on the stand.
Not so much lies on the stand as, for instance, not securing the crime scene.
Right.
So anything could have happened at that crime scene for something like 36 hours before it was secured. I would say, there were several examples of things like that where it was allowed. There was time and the possibility of tampering of evidence and covering up. Blood stains could have been cleaned up, etc. It was referred. The death was because it involved Senior Constable Chris Hurley at the time. The most senior police officer in Townsville was immediately contacted, and he dispatched two men from Townsville immediately to fly over to the island to conduct the investigation into the death, and they were both Chris Hurley's best friends. And they barbecued with Chris Hurley that night on their arrival when they were supposed to be conducting an independent investigation. So that sort of thing, everything had been completely covered up. So Chris Hurley couldn't be convicted.
So it's really about police investigating police, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Well, the Independent Commission Against Corruption, or whatever it's called in Queensland, I'm sorry, they all have different names, only doesn't have the budget to employ its own investigators, so it has to use police. Although that was certainly the case at the time.
Indeed, and it really... It beggars belief, really having a look at the fall. The fall is the thing that, as a radio broadcaster reporting on it, I found quite appalling. That the fall was blamed, wasn't it, at first?
Yes, that's right. Two falls, if you like. One, the fall that the coroner in Cairns, who examined the body, ruled, and that was, he said, I think from a substantial height, whereas then there's the other fall, which is in contention, which is when Chris Hurley was taking Murrinji into the watch house. There was a step up into the, what looked like a demount of a building, really, but step up into this watch house. And that the two men tripped as Murrinji resisted, and that they fell, and that Chris Hurley's weight and perhaps his elbow had crushed Murrinji's chest, where, you can judge for yourself whether that would provide sufficient force to cut a man's liver in two inside their body.
And yet there were witnesses that I just wanted to check with you here, that had heard Chris Hurley saying, "Have you had enough?" to the dead man.
Yes. There was a man who had been arrested on the charge, who was sitting in the police station, I believe handcuffed. His view of what happened was obscured by a large filing cabinet, so he couldn't actually see what was happening. But he testified at the first coronial inquest that he was under the impression that Murrinji was being punched repeatedly, and that he heard Chris Hurley say, "Is that enough?" or words to that effect, "Is that enough for you, Mr. Murrinji?" etc.
Absolutely. So it appears then that the evidence was inconsistent then. From one inquest to another. Not the evidence, sorry, the testimonies from one inquest to the other, because there were two inquests, right? And weren't there different things said by the police?
I don't think that, no. I don't think
Okay, I just wanted to check that.
There was inconsistencies on what the police said, although, of course, as I said, they were all singing from the same hymn sheet.
Ah.
So, I mean, that they said the same story, There were no inconsistencies in their story between the inquests.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to check that because I wasn't quite sure. Yeah, that's good to clarify that. Just for listeners, that it wasn't inconsistent so much, but it was. But can you just explain?
Yeah, sure. It wasn't that their testimony was inconsistent. It was that the evidence at the start of things,
right,
soon after Morangi was killed, had been tampered with, or could have been tampered with, but and the testimony of the people remained consistent, but that there was a lot of omission, that they, didn't mention a lot of things that other people said had happened. So there was. Well, let me put it this way: there was a sufficient question mark over the whole thing for the Director of Public Prosecutions to subsequently charge Chris Hurley with manslaughter. So that was only came about as a result of huge question marks over the whole investigation by the coroner's inquests in the first place. So that's why Chris Hurley subsequently got charged with manslaughter, because there were questions over the strength of the evidence. Because, as I said, things like best friends were sent to do the investigation, and crime scenes weren't secured, and things like that. So I hope that makes it clear.
No, it does, and I just wanted to make sure that listeners understood that, because this has been talked about over and over again on this show, because as you would be aware yourself, there have been many Aboriginal deaths in custody since then, and unfortunately, it's a lot of it is very similar.
Absolutely abominable record on behalf of this country. It's quite disgusting.
It is disgusting. I mean, you look at what happened with Arnie Tanya Day. What happened, that she was on a train in Victoria up at Castlemaine Station, and then she had some alcohol, and the drunkenness was considered. I know. It could be anybody on that train. If they'd been asleep, they wouldn't have been treated like that. Other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it should be a health response, not a police response, anyway.
Yes, of course. It comes from as a result of generations of trauma.
Because I was even just having a look at this book, just flipping through it at the moment. I'm not flipping through it, I'm on the computer, but where are paper books gone now?
Oh, that's all right. As long as you're reading it, that's great.
And, with the dead man, he was a notable singer and joker. Yeah. And it appears that at first the police were trying to say that he was swearing, and he wasn't, he was just singing.
That's right. Other people testified after the police said that he'd been swearing and obnoxious, but of course other people had seen and heard it, and they said that he had just been singing and joking around.
What is Who Let the Dogs Out? What song is that?
Oh gosh, I wish I could tell you.
I think it's
You're
reggae.
A complete music ignoramus. I think it is reggae. And it goes, "Who let the dogs out? Who? Who let the dogs out?" There you go. I'm singing on 3CR.
We need to get a guitar.
Famous author sings on 3CR. Not that I think I'm famous, listeners, believe me.
You never. Tell me, I mean, this book is definitely relevant. How can people read it?
Well, it's in most libraries. Unfortunately, though, I don't believe there's an electronic version, unless you can educate me otherwise. But it is in hundreds of libraries, I kid you not, around Australia, and people are still borrowing it very regularly because I get notified, which I'm very, very proud of.
It's very important, and that's what I wanted to ask you before you go. The footage, you mentioned that there was a video. I don't know if we spoke about this on air or off air. The videotape at the Watch House. Can you talk about that?
It's never been released. It is subject to a ongoing and very exotic law, so to suppose lawyers say. Lawyers that I spoke to couldn't find any other example in Australia legal history where information relating to this trial, including that video, are subject to a suppression order by the court until the end of time.
There was a suppression order.
Yeah,
of the videotape.
Broadcast it. They can't release it. It can't be watched. They watched it during the coroner's inquest, but it couldn't be released to the public, and is locked up somewhere behind closed doors.
What's the good of that?
Well, Queensland's a it's a big state, but it's a small population, and people are connected to other people, and the police are, I'm sure, were advocating for this video never to be seen by anybody, because it would have made them look very, very bad, I imagine.
Maybe, and I don't want to speculate.
He was supposed to have been screaming out for help and being ignored,
Exactly. Well, you never know. Chris Hurley could have been serving a sentence by now. If that had been... Don't want to speculate here, but...
Sorry, what?
Chris Hurley may be in prison if that videotape had been released. Not making assumptions. I'm not here to speculate.
Yeah,
I don't want to speculate here. But
I couldn't say for sure.
Me either. It's approximately 4:26, and you are listening to an interview with Jeff Waters, who is the author of Gone for a Song. Gone for a Song, A Death in Custody on Palm Island. Any final comments that you'd like to make? And thank you so much for coming on, Jeff. It's been great.
Well, thank you for plugging my book. I'll plug my second book, which is called Every Beat of My Heart, which you should read if you're approaching middle age, because it's all about the fact that I died for 57 minutes of a cardiac arrest.
Wow.
And my recovery from that. So learn about the warning signs of heart attack and cardiac arrest, and learn CPR. I say this in every radio interview.
I was Googling you. Oh, is that you too? Okay.
What a great chat.
Oh, wow. Jeff, that's great. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the program, and hopefully we'll be having you on at some stage.
Always happy to come back. Thank you for the interview.
Lovely to have you. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And that was Jeff Waters, who wrote the book, Gone for a Song in A Death in Custody on Palm Island. And I'm going to try and find the ISBN number of this, if I can. 978073332216. I'm not even sure if I'm actually reading it to the best of my ability, but anyway, I'm sure you'll be able to find it without the ISBN. And thank you once again to Jeff for coming onto the show.
Do you believe in the right to protest? Are you concerned about climate change and the environment? Then come and make your voice heard at a mass meeting on the right to organise for climate and the environment. Join others at 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday, March 7th at 535 Elizabeth Street, Central Melbourne, to discuss and then vote on practical ways to support climate action and the environment, and to defend the right to protest. Speakers include proud Gunai-Kurnai woman Marjorie Thorpe, United Workers Union's Godfrey Mose, and Environment Justice Australia lawyer Natalie Hogan, and will be facilitated by Tuffy Morwitzer, campaigner for the Goongerah Environment Centre. Come participate in some direct democracy for a better world. Your voice matters. RSVP is essential. Go to gecko.org.au/calendar to book your ticket. This event is wheelchair accessible and Auslan interpreted. A 3CR supporter.
Tune in to 3CR's annual International Women's Day broadcast, 24 hours of women and non-binary news, views and music on Wednesday the 8th of March. We want to celebrate the resistance, talent, strengths and power of women and genderqueer living here in the Kulin Nation and of those living, fighting and creating change all over so-called Australia and the world. This International Women's Day celebration is a celebration of feminism that knows that liberation from gender depression can never be achieved without dismantling all systems of domination and subjugation. From midnight Sunday the 7th of March until midnight on Monday the 8th of March, we'll bring you 24 hours of radio by women and non-binary presenters, producers and musicians. For details, go to 3cr.org.au/IWD 2023.
And if you've just tuned in, this is 3CR Community Radio, Doing Time Show, 855 AM on the dial. It's approximately 4:31 and we're going to be speaking next up with Dr. David Abello, who is from People with Disability Australia. We're proud and loud. People with Disability Australia joined the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras parade on Saturday 25th February as part of Sydney's World Pride 2023. And the National Disability Rights Peak Body are loud and proud with an 80-strong group of people with disability and supporters ready to participate. And I invited Dr. David Abello onto the show because I think it's really important to talk about not just the march, but also maybe to talk a little bit about the history of the police and some of the other Pride marches that were not so successful. And also because the Doing Time show has historically reported on quite a lot of people in prison, either that are gay or transgender, and who have experienced discrimination and transphobia. Hello, Dr. David Abello. Welcome to the program.
Marissa, lovely to talk to you.
You too. So, enlighten me. Tell me about the march.
The first one?
Oh, how many were there?
In 1978?
Oh, yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, why not? Well, there was a little bunch of us. I was about one of 20 or so people who got together to put on a day of events. We had the call from North America. The Briggs Initiative in California was going to ban homosexuals from teaching or holding public sector office. People in the UK were also being attacked by the likes of Mary Whitehouse. So we had a day of solidarity, a World Day of Solidarity, and we had a march in the morning around the city of Sydney. There was about 500 of us, which is huge for those days. It was the biggest thing we'd ever done. We had a seminar in the afternoon about homosexual rights movements around the world and in the third world as well, and we finished off the evening with what was going to be a fun event, a Mardi Gras. Was intended not to be quite as explicitly political and more in the fun department. But we had a permit from the police. We said there would be a couple of hundred people, 2,000 people turned up. The police freaked out. They let us go ahead with our parade down Oxford Street, but they pushed from behind to get it over and done with as quickly as possible. We were stopped from going into Hyde Park in the middle of the city, which is where we intended to go. We got stuck or trapped in College Street. We took off from there down William Street to the Cross, King's Cross. The reason we went to King's Cross was because Sydney was, Sydney shut down at 8 p.m. every night. It was like that then. So we went to the cross because there would be people on the streets, people who were sympathetic to us and who would be witnesses to what was about to happen to us. We went down Darlinghurst Road into the Alamein Fountain. We had a couple of speeches. We turned around to go home, and the police wagons had blocked every lane and street. So we were stuck, and then they hoed into us with the intent of arresting every single person there. We fought back violently to the best of our ability.
Yeah.
The police reacted, I suppose, appropriately to our behaviour. They banged people's heads into the sides of wagons. They throw people into the door of the wagon and bang the door on their legs. Quite a few broken legs like that. Pulling people's hair, pulling people's clothes. People would be put in the wagons, and then the next time the door opened, everyone would run out. People who did that got extra specially bad treatment. So it felt like it went for hours, but it only went for about half an hour. When the dust settled, we went off to Darlinghurst Police Station, where all the wagons had gone, and the 54 people who were in them, and we stood vigil out the front. We could hear screaming, we could hear beatings from inside the station. We chanted people's names who we know were getting particularly special treatment from the Darlinghurst police. They refused to let a doctor in and a lawyer. Quite a few people were arrested at the front of the police station that night too. When we turned up at the police courts on Monday, the magistrate, Farquhar, ordered the police to let people in. The police illegally closed the courthouse, and it meant that people who had to present their charges couldn't get into the courthouse. That's my dog, sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry, I'm just moving rooms.
The dog's obviously not happy.
Yeah. No, I live with a deaf person who just has no idea how much noise he makes. That's my boyfriend.
That's okay.
It was pretty horrible. We had 2 or 3 more major events to get people for the charges to be dropped, and we kept that up for a year. And I suppose the most important thing that came out of that was that we had a second Mardi Gras in 79. So it's true what some people say. If that police hadn't done what they did the first time around, there wouldn't have been another Mardi Gras probably. And we'd be doing something else instead.
Wow.
So I didn't get arrested because I'm short and I'm good at evading the police. You duck down and duck up somewhere else. But I was just lucky. The people who did get arrested, everyone knows this now, I think, had, as the usual behaviour of the newspapers, their names, addresses and occupations printed in the paper that week. So that was very disastrous for a lot of people. A lot of people lost family, friends, their house, their job, and so on. So, it was a big year for all of us, and I suppose it shaped the things to come.
We need to shine that spotlight. It's a timely reminder, isn't it?
Oh, it is, and the same thing could happen in many countries in the world tomorrow. And the same thing could happen in many rural and regional centres in Australia tomorrow. Would be different, but, I think these days we look to overseas, we look to defend queers in other nations, who face death penalties and so on, as people here did once. People often don't seem to know that you could be hung for being homosexual, and the male sexual assault on a male person, even if it was consensual, could get you 14 years in prison. So, there are a lot of people around the world who are still facing those kinds of regimes, those kind of laws, and we try to do what we can to shine a light on that as well, if I can borrow your metaphor.
Exactly, and it's so important. I mean, I've even done interviews on this show about conversion therapy, and I actually know of a friend some years ago now who was, his family tried to get him to do some therapy to convert him not to be gay. I don't know how even to explain it.
Yeah.
It does happen.
It's kind of crazy thinking.
It is.
Oh, it does, and, there isn't a single piece of international evidence that you can change people in that way. But you go back a few years when male homosexuality was illegal, courts would direct people to have aversion therapy, or they might bargain.
Aversion, that's right. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, and they might bargain, like, I'll have aversion therapy instead of 10 years in jail, that sort of thing. So people would go. So the courts actually directed people to aversion therapy. The irony of that, and I shan't name names because I don't want to get your station into trouble, but most of that was done at the Prince of Wales Hospital under a particular professor who came out as gay, ultimately. So, there you go. Irony. Terrible irony.
It's absolutely. Defamation can't happen if it's the truth, can it?
No. Well, the thing is, I know several people who had aversion therapy around that time and kind of mucked up their sex lives for a very long time.
Of course. It's traumatic. Yeah. It's traumatic. And in fact, without naming names, but the friend that I knew, we've lost touch now, but I knew him for many years, and he was traumatised. He's had long-term, far-reaching traumatic consequences from that.
Yeah. Yes, the same for some of my friends. So this kind of wave of Christian conversion therapy is nothing new. Nothing new. The state used to do it too. Now the churches continue. Not all the churches, of course, but some of them. And, it's premised on a complete fabrication, that there's one thing, that there's anything wrong with being homosexual or lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and that God doesn't like it, which is a bit contradictory in terms of Christian philosophy. I think God is supposed to love all of us and has fashioned us in his image, her image. I'm not a very religious person, but, it's shockingly contradictory to me. What kind of love is that, So I feel I'm glad the states are variously moving against the practice.
Absolutely, I'm glad as well, and we need to get that, remove that here as well. And I'm also feeling, I'm quite sure actually that I did an interview with the Human Rights Law Centre some years ago now about how the criminal records of gay people, they've cleaned it out now. They're it's no longer the case, is it?
That's right. Yeah.
Just a quick, go on.
Couple of reasons behind that. It's not all about what people did, it's about who arrested them.
Correct.
I got beaten unconscious by two detectives in my home once in 1982 who came to extort money or charge me with homosexual sex. And the Fitzgerald inquiry into New South Wales Police Force actually wrote that up as one of the things that they regularly did. So it wasn't all about just getting beaten up in the streets. The corruption of the police was utter and absolute, and they were totally distant from any kind of legitimate authority. So when Neville Wran got elected first Labor Premier for some time, of course, it's one of the reasons we got our heads bashed in in '78. They were trying to embarrass him because they regarded us as part of the Labor constituency, if you know what I mean. Mm. So we were a political football back then, still, as we are today, in some respects.
Absolutely. I'd really love to have you back again at some stage to talk more about this. Now, going on with disability, sure. The PWDA has spent over 40 years fighting for the rights of people with disability, and I think that disability, it's really fantastic that there's a media release about disability and the Pride March, because a lot of the time disability would get left out, and the right to full autonomy over our own bodies and identities. So can you just talk a little bit about how that's connected?
Very connected, because we're whole people. Absolutely. With various attributes and characteristics. And, there is a strong intersection, as we call it, between disability and queer. Both words are often misused. That's one connection. But the other connection is that they both involve, when you're becoming a sexual person, that you're getting pushback from your environment, perhaps friends, family, neighbours, employers, whatever. So being queer or being disabled involves a coming out and a pushing back against that kind of resistance. So that's the sort of thing we have most in common, I think. We've been queers have been a big part of the disability movement in New South Wales. I was elected the president of PWDA in 2018, 2019. I was the first openly queer president, also the first president to have been struck by lightning, and also the oldest president ever elected. So I had a few feathers in my bow there. But we organised within the disability movement. We formed a group called Access Plus Spanning Identities in '98, lasted about 12 years, and we were active within the movement and within queer communities to bring those sort of concerns and realities together. We had a very positive acceptance in the disability movement, probably the most queer-friendly disability movement in the world at the time, and we didn't have so much luck with the gay community. That was a bit of a nut that was a lot harder to break, but we did. So the first time we went in Mardi Gras, I think, was 2004, something like that, around there, as a group, and we had a few years off along the way, but we're still doing it every year. I didn't march with the 78ers. I did, march with the 78ers at Mardi Gras the other day, because I'm a 78er, But certainly I visited the disability contingent in the build-up to the parade and met all my mates there, did a few interviews and stuff like that. It's lovely. That couple of hours before you go, when you're all together, is just, it's long enough to get around and see everyone and say hello and so on. So that's the connection, I suppose, it's a deep connection. We've brought a lot of people along for the ride. We've given people a lot of courage to be queer. We've given people courage to be out and proud about their disability. And I think, the more outlandish and extreme your demands are, the harder the fight and the longer the fight, but the bigger the outcomes, and with some pride I look at that now and think, well, if we didn't do that, where would we be? And I don't know. You can't undo history. But I think about it, from time to time.
Indeed. And how did you feel with the police float being there at this current Pride March?
Oh, look, I have I'd say, well, having been, the only time I've ever been beaten unconscious was by police. And really, I've always felt uncomfortable about them being in the parade, even though we can thank them for the thing happening in the first place, but what they did, I don't think there's any place for them. The first time they were in the parade, they all got paid to go, and they were in their uniforms. We were particularly angry about that. We got no problem with police putting on a frock and a bit of makeup and going in their social group or whatever, It's not a personal thing. Seeing them in rows in great number is quite traumatic for people. Some of our Indigenous friends, some of our friends grew up on the street. I remember a story about one 17-year-old when the police grabbed him. They looked at him and they said, "Oh, Johnny, go home. Go home. I'm not arresting you. You're too much paperwork." So lots of people had really negative experiences of police in those days, not just from being queer or being caught having sex or something, but just general policing practices. And we remember that. You don't forget that stuff. I have no fear of them now, but I used to be terrified of them. So at least I have no fear of them. I might even ring them if I needed, which I would have done years ago. I would have suffered in silence. So I think, some people feel strongly that it's a symbol of progress. Some people say F the police. Some people don't care. But nevertheless, it always evokes strong feelings. We don't have the same feelings when we see firefighters in uniform or, nurses or doctors or anyone in their profession group, But police in uniform is challenging for some. Not everyone, but some.
Indeed, and very, very true.
I should say about the Police Integrity and the Hate Crimes Commission, so it only takes something like that, for the police to be uncooperative, dealing with something that's deeply, deeply, deeply important to all of us, all the people we know who got bashed or killed on beats. To see them not take up the responsibility to pursue these matters and re-investigate them and stall the inquiry and get a rebuke from the head of the inquiry, it's a reminder. You think, oh yeah, here we are, we're back here again. We haven't got the resources. It's too hard, And you think, yeah, they do hate us. They do.
It's terrible.
So we keep being reminded of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dr. David, it's been great having you on. Unfortunately, I'd love to talk to you longer. We could be here all night, really. But
call me anytime.
May
Marissa.
I? I'd love to have you back on the show sometime.
Yeah,
it's just
anytime.
been wonderful listening to you. Not so wonderful hearing about what's been going on with the police, but it's always good to look at history, make sure it doesn't repeat itself.
Repeat itself, yes.
You know, we're on the
keep
same
saying that
page
to
here.
people.
Yeah, it's so important. And also to set the record straight about the police float and the significance of that police float at the Pride March, and that nearly needs to be talked about in the mainstream media.
Well, people have been battling against that within the movement and within the community, and
It's a dilemma.
one day that'll change, I think. Anyhow, have a good afternoon, Marissa, and hello everyone in Radioland.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Love
And
you all.
let's talk
Bye.
soon. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that was Dr. David Abello, who was just really wonderful to listen to. It's approximately 4:55. We've only got a couple of minutes left from the show. And thank you to Jeff Waters and Dr. David Abello for coming on to the show this evening. I don't think I'm going to have time for any music. Just a reminder to keep attending the Uruk Commission, and where Commissioner Sue-Ann Hunter, along with other commissioners, is looking at truth-telling and treaty. So it's goodbye from Marissa, and stay tuned every Monday from 4 to 5 for the Doing Time show, and we're going to be going out with our theme song, Black Fella, White Fella from the Rumpy Band. Bye. Stay strong.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Black fella, white fella, it doesn't matter what you color, as long as you a true fella, as long as you a real fella. All the people of different races with different lives in different places, it doesn't matter what your name is. We got to have lots of changes. We need more brothers if we're to make it. We need more sisters if we're to save it. Are you the one who's gonna stand up and be counted? Are you the one who's gonna be there when we're shouting? Are you the one who's always ready with a helping hand? Are you the one who understands this family plan? Black fella, white fella, yellow fella, any fella, it doesn't matter what you color, as long as you a true fella. All the people of different races with different lives in different places, it doesn't matter which religions, it's all the same where the ship is sinking. We need more brothers if we're to make it. We need more sisters if we're to save it. Are you the one who's gonna stand up and be counted?
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast produced in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.